This still could have been a major implement in the story. And so all of that was why Jurassic World Dominion was a bit of a disappointing end to the franchise, and not the epic finale it deserved to be.
So, let's try this again. Let me start off by saying I'm basically losing my voice and have been for the past 2 weeks, so this is why I sound this way. But also, I love the first Jurassic Park. It is my favorite film of all time. The writing, the story, characters, the visuals, John Williams' iconic theme. It's an absolute masterpiece, and I love it. And somehow or another, Dominion left this franchise hanging on the opposite end of that spectrum. So it was obviously time to go back to what made it great. Early details of this new film were exciting and reassuring. We're going back to the island, darker tone and scary dinosaurs, Gareth Edwards directing, and shooting on Panavision 35mm film. This movie had everything going for it, and now it's here. So, what went wrong? Let me also say that I absolutely wanted to love this movie because I love what Jurassic Park is. But unfortunately, this film only has the essence of what that movie was. Before I vent off into a rant, we first have to understand everything this movie already had working against it, namely the previous movie. Actually, technically, the movie before that one. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom made the bold but predictable and inevitable move of bringing dinosaurs into our world. Whether for the best or the worst, the can of worms was open and there's no way to close it. Yet, somehow, Dominion found a way. With a perfect setup to ending the franchise and bringing its theme to its climax. But Dominion quickly tossed that story aside and went with, locust and economics. Kill me. So our story jumps 5 years after the events of Dominion, with a new cast and new story entirely. But this movie faced quite the dilemma. How do you take this dinosaur-infested world back to the roots of Jurassic Park? You have to either go with the story Dominion refused to tell, or contradict that story entirely. They had to make a choice. It's debatable as to whether they made the right choice, but they chose the latter and promptly undid the impact of the last two movies. And of course, I do want to start off by saying that there are positives to this film. Obviously, it's always nice to get back to the atmosphere of a Jurassic Park movie on the island running around with dinosaurs. And of course, the raft scene, where our characters have to evade the T-Rex on the river, is definitely the best scene in the film, and I overall liked it a lot. But that doesn't mean that this choice is without its problems, which brings us to the first aspect of this film's negatives. This choice causes problems with characters and this world in general, leaving very important questions unanswered. Is the world tired of dinosaurs? Are they no longer interested? Is the general consensus that dinosaurs are deadly and dangerous and shouldn't live, or is it the opposite? Has the world taken its own precautions to take out dinosaurs, or did they just let nature take its course? These may not seem like crucial questions, but once you start introducing characters and goals within this post-Dominion world, these questions do indeed become crucial. What we are told is, well, that. It's merely told to us. Through bits of dialogue, we're told that nobody cares about dinosaurs anymore, which already speaks to a huge problem within this movie, the writing itself. Now, the story itself isn't terrible, at least in terms of style. It's a very similar feel from earlier films like The Lost World or Jurassic Park 3, although it too is not without problems, like having your 3 specific dinosaurs you need conveniently on a different island somewhere together. Nice. But as for the writing, it's rough. There is absolutely no subtlety, depth, or nuance in the writing whatsoever. Characters just straight up tell you how they feel, why they do what they do, and what's happening in the moment. This movie doesn't trust us to take the hint, so they give us a flashing neon sign instead. So let's take a look at our new characters and see why they don't work. Scarlett Johansson joins the Jurassic franchise as this movie's lead, Zora, an experienced mercenary tasked with extracting blood from the 3 largest dinosaurs for the development of a medical cure. After seeing her performance, if I'm being honest, she is definitely one of the weakest characters in this film. Her character just does not come off as a mercenary in any regard. Her personality is strangely all over the place. She's almost giddy and happy, not a dark or roughened up type of person you would expect, and her actions say the same. There's a moment near the middle of the film when they find their first target, the Mosasaurus, and chase after it. Zora, the supposed mercenary, has the rifle to take the shot, but can't get a clean shot and accidentally shoots and misses? Like, what? You would think an expert mercenary would at least have any sense of trigger discipline, but I guess not. And just the way she interacts in her introduction, friendly with others and excited at prospects, I can't buy her as this character. And while we're talking about the scene, this is where that terrible writing starts to take over. This movie has some of the most blatant character summaries, I don't even want to call them introductions, summaries that explain everything at face value. Biggest example of this is character motivation. ScarJo's character takes up the job because money. Why does she need the money?
Don't know.
Does she even need it? Is she desperate or just entertained at the thought of it all?
Don't know.
And her backstory is presented even worse, not only because it is also terribly established with no setup or meaning, but there's no attempt to connect her motives and her backstory together when it was right there. I mean, that seems like the kind of thing you would go for, right? For context, there's a moment when Zora wants to hint at her tragic backstory to Duncan. So in a genius writing move, she flat out tells us that her partner and mother died and, sad emotions and stuff. When she begins to open up to the doctor, she flat out tells us she probably should have taken more days off from her PTSD. Wow. Just stellar. Absolute cinema right there. And I just want to point out real quick, David Coep wrote this, who also did the screenplay for the first Jurassic Park and The Lost World? What happened, man? Did you have AI write the script for you or something? Oh no.
If you don't think screenwriters who are under the gun of time, deadlines, aren't using Chat GPT and AI, you're crazy, because they are.
Oh no. Anyways, her character doesn't get any better even when the film tries to give her a character arc by the end. When the doctor thinks that the cure should be for everyone and not monopolized through a single big pharma company, there's no personal reason or motive for any character to connect this, it's just brought up randomly. But to be fair, it is a real conflict of interest that could have been explored in this movie. Unfortunately, most of the issues with this again lie on Zora, whose motivations and morals are so wishy-washy and non-foundational that her character arc by the end of the movie isn't an arc at all. And if you make it to the end of the film, you'll understand what I mean by that. Let's flip to a positive note. It's not all terrible though. I did think that Jonathan Bailey's character, Dr. Henry Loomis, was the highlight of the movie and not only pulled off his character well, but felt like someone who actually fit into the story and environment. He was by far the best, most interesting and fleshed out character. His motivation is a lot more clear. He's desperate to keep his museum and research afloat and needs funding, which yes is essentially the case with Alan Grant straight from Jurassic Park, but hey, at least it's something. But again, the world building in this film complicates things. Why focus on dinosaurs and fossils when the real thing is right outside? This leads to Zora offering the most ridiculous reasoning ever to try to convince him to go with them, seeing a real dinosaur in its natural habitat. Yeah, the world building starts to become really inconsistent. But without further conversation, they all agree to go on the mission. I doubt it's ScarJo herself, but the story should have focused on Henry as the protagonist instead, making him a fish out of water. With a group he doesn't belong and in a place he doesn't belong. It would have also provided some nice contrast to the rest of the team of gritty, experienced contract killers and mercenaries. It would have been nice. But the most frustrating character work of them all would have to be our rich guy Martin Krebs, whom I will refer to as Rich Guy or Discount Orlando Bloom. So, Discount Orlando Bloom is CEO of a pharmaceutical company and wants to extract the dinosaur blood to develop into what they hope will be a medical breakthrough and even a cure for heart disease and other medical conditions. And he is also in competition with a rival company, which means he's getting desperate and this needs to be done fast. This will be relevant later. But we come back to a certain question throughout the film. Does he actually care about people and giving them the cure?
Don't know.
The film wants him to be the big bad so hard, despite the fact that he's really not. And we'll come back to that fully in a minute. But the way they built and used his character throughout the movie was definitely what helped weaken it. Our villain, spoiler alert, I guess if it wasn't already clear who would become the antagonist, is now bottom of the barrel and the most stereotypical version of the rich businessman antagonist archetype we've seen yet. And that's saying something when Fallen Kingdom has a better antagonist than your movie does. But in defense, the reason why this movie's villain is so weak is because, again, he's not really a villain, but the movie desperately feels it needs one, so it's only natural. Oh, and I almost forgot, there's another entire group of people in the movie that we haven't even gotten to yet. So there are many more characters throughout the movie, a few for kill count alone, but I'm not going to go through all of them. But this movie also decided it needed that innocent family element to get the audience to actually care and feel tension, which actually rarely works throughout the movie. So meet the movie's second group and subplot, a family group of 4 who get mixed up with our main cast when they're attacked by amphibious dinosaurs on their boat and rescued. And just by their introduction alone, it wastes no time establishing these trope-based characters. The father, who doesn't function much like a father at all throughout the movie, teenage daughter and her kill-fodder boyfriend, and the kid, because of course there's a kid, you know the formula by now. In the long run, these characters contribute almost nothing and didn't need to exist in the first place, but I do understand why you want that family dynamic. There is a reason it appears in every Jurassic Park film, and you know what? Sometimes it worked great. And besides, our main cast in this film wasn't doing much for us either, so there's also that. But what I feel the script should have done was either have just the father and the little girl, or at least kill off the other 2 so it's just them by the end. This is why I call this guy the kill fodder boyfriend, because that's exactly what he's established as. The lazy, snarky character that everyone roots for to die within his first 10 minutes. We even get a Jaws 2 moment where he's in the water and has to swim from a monster to the boat. But right here was a big mistake, as this Jaws 2 moment quickly turned into just a Jaws moment when the guy swimming from the shark makes it up and survives. It's really strange because the setup was right there, so why not use it? Is this a trope at this point? Absolutely, but they were going for it all the same. And it makes you start to think that maybe tropes exist in a certain circumstance for a reason. And this speaks to a bigger point throughout the movie. Not only does this unlikable and pointless character survive, but that's the case for almost every character. Aside from the background characters that we don't know anything about and become obvious kill count, none of our main cast face any consequences, any injuries, any death at all. Spoilers, I guess, but there's a moment at the end of the film where Duncan, an old friend of Zora's, takes a flare and leads the D-Rex away so the group can escape on a boat, ultimately sacrificing himself to save them. It's a nice, meaningful little moment, and I liked it. But I had a sneaking suspicion, and I was right. Of course he didn't die, you silly goose. I can't believe that now we can't even have characters make meaningful sacrifices and die. But I guess I should have known better. We've seen it with Star Wars, we've seen it with Marvel, we've seen it with The Last Matrix. Nobody's ever truly dead anymore. And it's frustrating because it robs this ending of the little emotional impact and meaning it actually brought to the film, and just straight up undid it all. For what? Really, for what? Duncan should have died. His death would have been meaningful, not just to the characters, but to the story itself. But they couldn't even do that. Now, as you may have noticed in this review by now, there's a pretty basic plot and not a whole lot of conflict. The one and only source of conflict rests on a moment where teenage daughter tries to radio for help, but rich guy stops her. She falls off the edge and claims he tried to kill her. But aside from just watching it and seeing that she pushes him and puts herself in that situation, the truth is that even if he tried to save her, he wouldn't have time, and she was fine anyway, since everyone jumps overboard like 5 seconds later. And we, the audience, know he was trying to stop her from making contact, and we know why, because it would have blown the whole operation. So teenage daughter's entire motivation becomes, I'm gonna kill that guy, for the entire movie. Zora even asks him about it at one point and says to him,
If I find out otherwise, though, we'll leave you here and you can rejoin the food chain.
It's so cartoonish and so on the nose, and it's one of the most blatant examples of the terrible writing in this movie. This is supposed to be the big indicator that our guy is a villain, actually. But no matter what the movie does with him, it always shows the opposite each and every time. Now, a few scenes earlier, on the boat when they get the distress call from the family, Rich Guy says they should continue on with the mission, with them being only a few minutes out. But Duncan, with the force-fed backstory exposition dump earlier, decides to turn around and head 20 miles in the other direction to get them. The movie wants this to be a moment of Rich Guy showing his true colors while presenting Duncan and the others in a passionate light, but even here it doesn't work. Rich Guy points out that another boat will probably hear their call and find them, and he's probably right. And Duncan only turns the boat around because there's some resemblance to his own family life there, again from that exposition dump. Or perhaps the trauma dump, I should say. This moment isn't about Rich Guy being cruel and evil and Duncan being pure and compassionate. It's more subtle and nuanced than that. Rich Guy is simply being logical within the situation and has priorities. Aside from the fact that the family is perfectly fine still when we come back to them. And the second moment, as we've established, is when teenage daughter tries to radio for help and falls overboard. Then Zora asks him about it out of the blue. Then Rich Guy finds a gun from an old crashed helicopter, which I will also point out is straight out of Predator, but I digress. This again wants us to believe that he's doing this because he's just evil and plans betraying everyone. But all it really does is make you ask, why don't they all have weapons? Where are they? Did they lose them? Did they ever have any on them? This is all so stupid and silly. And quite convenient, I should add. So if anything, he's again doing something logical, finding a tool to defend himself with. And all the while, teenage daughter is only set on finding him and constantly bringing it up to the point where she just annoyed me. And then the two groups finally meet up for the third act, where the inevitable confrontation happens. Again, the movie wants so badly for us to be on her side, but no reasonable person would be, at least not entirely. Rich Guy reveals the gun and cuffs the briefcase to himself so it can't go anywhere. And also take notice, he doesn't even really point the gun, he just uses it to try to de-escalate the situation and keep everyone calm and under control, telling everyone that when the helicopter arrives, they're all leaving together. Tell me, does that sound like a greedy, selfish antagonist to you? Of course, this conflict doesn't really have a resolution. The giant xenomorphosaurus just grabs the guy and eats him. So, staying true to the franchise's traditional villain death we always see coming from a mile away. It's frustrating because this is essentially the main escalating conflict throughout the entire movie. And it's just so lame and weak and entirely based on a one-sided misunderstanding. Like, why didn't he even try to explain or defend himself? Obviously, if she had alerted anyone, they would all be caught and face extreme criminal charges at least. Does she not get this by now? But instead, he gives shady, villain-like dialogue, saying almost verbatim, don't listen to whatever crazy things this girl says, because I guess the script says so. It's lazy, it's annoying, and it's so on the nose. Unfortunately, that is the writing of this movie through and through. Now, before I wrap this up, there is one last point I want to make, and it's a pretty major one. This movie marketed the absolute heck out of some very specific things, which I feel only caused them to shoot themselves in the foot in the end. The biggest implied aspect of this movie was its return to form. All the marketing, the story itself, tried to convince us that it was a return to a true Jurassic Park movie. But ironically, this currently sits as perhaps the most forgettable movie of the entire franchise. Even more so than the last trilogy in its entirety. And if there's anything worse than a bad but risk-taking movie, it's a forgettable, boring, disposable, and ultimately safe one. Or how about the D-Rex? Throughout all the promotional material, trailers, posters, toys even, the new genetically modified hybrid dinosaur, the D-Rex, was marketed as the ultimate big bad monster of the movie. Unfortunately, once you watch the film, you quickly realize that's not the case, not even close. It appears in the first scene of the film, but is never even mentioned again until the final third act showdown, where it quite literally just appears back into the movie for whatever reason. And from a thematic angle, it's almost completely irrelevant to the story. The movie wants to go the same route as the original, wanting to explore the problems that come when man meddles with power they barely understand, but there's just no basis, no meat to the theme whatsoever. This mutated monstrosity just appears randomly, as if the filmmakers themselves forgot about it. And again, it's frustrating because we've now come to the point where we're literally fighting Godzilla. I mean, look at this thing. Look at the size of it. It's ridiculous. It's just a big blob of a movie monster that resembles the Rancor from Return of the Jedi more than it resembles a mutated dinosaur. But I don't know, maybe I would have a different opinion if we actually got to see a lot more of it, or if it was used at all in the movie, but I don't know. Perhaps if this movie had treated its monster with more care, it could have worked. but it just doesn't do anything with it. And that is by far the biggest overall problem with this movie, is that it doesn't do anything with any of its material. It tries to do what its predecessors have already done better and over a decade ago. It doesn't do anything with the characters. The majority of them are bland, one-dimensional caricatures of older characters with no emotion, no motive, and no soul. Our mercenary doesn't feel like a real protagonist, let alone even a mercenary. The villain is generic and cartoonish as a villain. The story is just a blatant copy of The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 mushed into one. And by the end of the movie, I found myself asking, what was even the point? What is this movie's purpose for existing? What new elements has it brought to the franchise? And the answer is, none.